Imagine this, you're trapped in an enclosed space with no contact to the outside world. Strangers are all around you, suspicious, confused, and scared. You're told by some faceless voice that the only way out is to commit the perfect murder to one of the many strangers around you. Succeed, and all others will perish painfully. Fail, and you'll just be another chapter in a dark book. Not only that, but this faceless voice is always seeming to be watching and takes their game very seriously. Break even the simplest of rules, and it could cost you your life. Unknowingly, you end up breaking one, the speaker crackling with a mocking tone speaking down to you. The voice tells you that since you couldn't follow the rules, you'll have to pay the price. Then you tell them, "No thanks, I don't wanna," and walk back to your room and ignore any other attempt to be contacted. Way to go. I've talked about in the past the amazing game known as Murder Mystery, which if you haven't seen that video yet, I heavily recommend you go check it out because this video will most likely be referencing a lot of information from the previous one. There's a whole playlist. This is the second episode of the entire thing. Immersion is by far one of the key components of this game, regardless if you choose to roleplay or not. Part of the immersion comes with a power dynamic between host and player. If that dynamic isn't there and the player chooses to go against the host, the game will surely start to crumble if the host does not squash the rebellion right away. As a host, you have three main responsibilities: keeping the game fair, keeping trust of your players, and keeping the game smooth. If you don't have all three, your games will be messy and cause players unneeded aggravation. This is a personal opinion, and I know others who disagree, but to me, a host's main concern is the players over their own personal enjoyment during the game. Sure, it is possible to have fun while hosting, I'm not saying that, but plenty of hosts choose what they think is more fun over the actual well-being of their players. This bothers me because not only does it come with the risk of favoritism, literally breaking the first rule of hosting, but it also makes you lose credibility as a good host. Let's break these topics down to explain more in detail what I expect from a host personally. For example, I've seen hosts who have favorite players or players they just don't like. When a favorite player kills, the host will be very cryptic on their hints or purposely lead everyone in a different direction and claim it's something they've always done. When a player the host doesn't like goes and murders though, especially if they murdered the favorite, the host is more mean with their hints and give very obvious points towards the killer in question. This ruins the fun for everyone, minus the few that are benefiting, and players can tell when someone is being favorited versus disliked. Many old friends stopped playing Murder Mystery strictly because of a host's obvious favoritism and just could never be interested in trying it again. If you as a host have someone who is troublesome in your games, you either have to set a clear boundary with them and remove them if they do not follow it, or learn to suck it up. Treating a player badly because of your bias will only lead the disliked player to disrespect you back, and less likely to follow the flow of the game. And while it is a great motive to remove them, it isn't a great motive in keeping players. Outsiders will see that you're being unfair, and often that will leave a sour taste in their mouth about you, the host, versus the player, unless that player shows in the short time that they're there why you dislike them. This also shows other players it's pointless to argue if a favorite is being unfair, because you are more likely to take their side. Even if this isn't fully true and you'd give the other players a chance, showing favoritism has a ton of negative side effects that will cause unnecessary malice, drama, and dislike towards you and the favorites. This is even worse when the favorites don't even like the extra perks they get, because they've been thrown into a center of awkward situation where they're seen as an enemy to the other player instead of an ally. Some examples on how favoritism can be implemented is the previous spoken murder hints, punishments, special abilities, extra lives that come out of nowhere, ignoring or changing previously established rules, or taking the word of a favorite player over someone else's. That last one, though, is more complex because, of course, in theory, the people you enjoy to play with have just as much experience playing Murder Mystery as you. So, they'd understand your hosting expectations and could be a trustworthy source to calm disputes. This is where the second rule, trust, comes in. Your players trust you to know what's going on, or at the very least to make an effort to right any issues that come up. As a host, you should be vigilant, but not all-knowing. Your players should be comfortable with taking an unfair death because they know they can dispute it with you privately, or tell you with confidence when something you've done in a previous game felt unfair. Everyone is always improving, and having that understanding with your players that they can make suggestions to post-game without fear of being criticized is an important part of trust. If a player doesn't trust you, they're less likely to try being risky in the game, which should always be encouraged as long as it doesn't break any hard rules. Otherwise, nothing will ever happen. In a game long ago, I snuck out of my bedroom at night, and when I was caught, I was punished with the task of killing 3 other people in one day. These 3 players were also caught and given the exact same punishment, so that started some serious tension between the 4 of us. If you know murder mystery, you'll know killing 3 people at once is a near impossible task, especially before the previous bodies were found, or being able to have a possible alibi. The only reason I was able to get away with it was because I played with a friend who loved covering for their friends, and so after I killed one person, he killed a random player. Then in trial, we convinced the group that the other 2 players that I had to target were the perpetrators. That game made me dislike murder mystery, instead focusing on hosting every once in a while. That's literally all it takes for some people. One bad game can put a player off forever. And while it sucks because there are good hosts out there, it's the nature of the beast. Murder mystery is super time consumptive, so trying to try it out with a few different people can end with frustration and feeling like a lot of time was wasted. I've had a few games end where I felt like I could have done something better with my time, and we don't want that. This is why trust is one of the top 3 factors, because even if the game goes badly, having that trust with the host will have them come back for second chances. As well as, and this just kinda counters the previous blurb about favoritism, but the players you have a trusting bond with can help clean up unruly players who aren't bad enough to ban, but still pretty annoying. This is where the complexity within favoritism and trust comes in. Sure, treating that one player as an authority over the others will leave a sour taste, but if this person who constantly played fair, taken death with grace and honesty, and doesn't abuse their word, then it won't be a problem for the other players when they say something is wrong. In my friend's server, we have a few people who are at this level of trust, myself included. Once, as a helper, I witnessed a girl purposely avoiding death from a very trustworthy friend, and while I didn't see the initial dodge, after he came up to me and let me know, I witnessed the second death avoidance. I stopped her, and before I could get a word out, she killed my friend instead. Even though I wasn't the host, I instantly vetoed that death and told her he had tried to kill her twice now, and she decided to go off and say that she didn't hear it, it's not fair, etc, etc. My friend let it slide and went off in a different direction, and she started grumbling under her breath and left as well. At that point, I went to the host and told him what was going on, and shortly someone claimed that there was a dead body. It was my friend, and as soon as he went into the private room, he stated that he was killed by the girl previously, but it felt like it wasn't fair due to the multiple attempts on her life. On top of that, he also mentioned that she started name-calling him after she killed him, so that's why he took the death, because he was getting upset and wanted to leave. The host witnessed none of this, and I only witnessed part of the story, but knowing who our friend was and the fact that he'd never purposely avoid death or cause problems, since he would just help out post-game, we both knew he was telling the truth. Do I agree with how the host handled the situation afterwards? Not really. But different hosts have different strokes, and my friend just helped out post-death and probably had a better time. Having players you can trust to be fair and hold you to a higher standard to the others helps keep the game smooth, which is our final key point. Keeping the game smooth may seem like an obvious goal, but it really isn't as easy as you'd think. You know the saying, you have to make a mess to clean a mess? Same goes for hosting. Sometimes to keep the game flowing nicely, you may realize that a rule or expectation could be causing more problems than it's worth. While murder mystery isn't meant to be easy, it is meant to be fun. It is a game after all. And sometimes that means being flexible on what you as the host can do. An example of this that my friend gave me was that he has a rule on holding weapons in front of him. If caught, you'll be punished. If he can tell that the players could be on the more cautious side, he'll ignore this rule and let them do what they want. Another example he gave was if only a certain amount of players are risking to murder, he'll suddenly just give them a break from their punishment so they can have a better chance. At this current moment, there really isn't any great benefits to killing, something that I hope on changing with the rework, so giving players the edge to kill is important in keeping the game smooth. Another great example is that if you have a game full of killers, adding more rules or making it harder to kill could also work out, because the trial time isn't for everyone and can cause some serious burnout. I've seen it a lot. At the end of the day, while there may be some slow points, keeping the game's flow consistent and keeping the players' attention is pivotal in making a successful game. This could also mean hosting less, more variety of game modes, mini challenges within the days, causing minor panic over someone missing, etc. As stated at the start of this video, immersion is key. Which brings me to a very important bit: being respected as a host. While many hosts will make their games roleplay based, others don't bother with the backstory and the like. You can get in, get your role, and just play the game. No motives, no characters, no nothing. Some people will roleplay even in non-roleplay games, but no matter what you choose, it is important as the host to make sure that each and every player respects your authority. When someone decides to argue with you during the game because of something they don't like, it can cause tension between the other players. If you as a player have a concern, make sure to bring it up privately to the host, as they may not realize why you disagree with whatever they're doing. Bringing it up in an aggressive manner or straight up overtaking the host's presence is not only extremely disrespectful, but causes serious trouble for both you, the player, and the hosts themselves. I'm going to use an old community known as Bloodbath Fever for this. I've heard they've apparently rebranded and changed hosts and owners and all that other stuff, so take this story with a grain of salt that this is the old Bloodbath. But I did not like Bloodbath. I've stayed a bit quiet about their name for a long time now, but I'm tired of it. If you've seen my other videos talking about this map in particular, you know the story. In case you don't know, I was bullied pretty badly because of this map. The players who frequented Old Bloodbath were some of the most conceited, up their own asses kind of people I've ever met. They bullied me, bullied my friends, and overall were unpleasant to deal with. I don't know what the new Bloodbath is like, but honestly I don't have any interest in finding out. The way some of their player base would go out of their way to tell me my map was garbage or try to backseat host other hosts' games drove me nuts! For the longest time, so many hosts that I knew had to start their games with, "I am not like Bloodbath. Do not expect my style to be like Bloodbath. If you want Bloodbath, go look at Bloodbath Fever." Because literally these people would go and join smaller servers, play the game, and spend the entire time arguing that these aren't Bloodbath roles. That's not how Bloodbath would do it. Do you have the Bloodbath role? It makes my blood boil! The thought of one type of gameplay that is superior to others is stupid and extremely close-minded of them, especially since personally, I wasn't even a fan of their rules. I only played a few of their games and I did have fun, but it just wasn't worth how conceited many of them could be. These are the kind of people that should be dealt with instantly in your games, because if a player does not respect your authority as a host, they will continue to push it to get away with stuff. Another great example was the one I used at the start. Sometimes players will argue about their punishments and then say, "I'm not doing that." A punishment isn't meant to be super fun, but it's also not meant to be super hard. Having that balance of, crap, I gotta do this now, but it ain't the worst thing, will help keep the flow of the game while also being fair. Harsher punishments come with more rule breaking or serious transgressions. If you as a player are uncomfortable with a punishment, you need to talk to the host and explain why you are uncomfortable. That is it. If you are not doing it because you just don't want to do it, that is a completely different story and is disrespectful to the host. If your player chooses to ignore your punishments or ignore you talking to them, they shouldn't be allowed to play. Because these are the people who will ruin your game the fastest. The ones who don't respect your power over them in the game and complain or whine or talk over you or argue with you or tell you that you're doing something wrong or say, "That's not how I would have done it." These people make the games awkward for everyone else and can either cause a fight or make people less likely to want to rejoin because of how uncomfortable they were. If you don't deal with these obnoxious players, it will only hurt you in the end. And if you host your own murder mystery server, other hosts could either be your greatest ally or your worst threat. I remember when this random guy came out of nowhere and tried to act like he was a big shot because he made a mechanic in the game that I hate with my entire being. To the point where I've asked hosts ahead of time if they even use the mechanic in their games, because if they do, I refuse to join it, since I hate it that much. When he found out there was another big host, which was my friend, he acted like a monarch coming to see a smaller kingdom, demanding that I take him to the other man. I laughed at him and just left, but someone else ended up letting him join. This guy tried to walk around with his chest puffed up like he's hot shit and wanted to trade stories of hosting, pretty much to brag. My friend was too busy, talked to him for like a minute away from spawn, and then while my friend was distracted, he came back to spawn and told the players that he was hosting a real game of murder mystery and dropped a portal for everyone to join. A few even did, and that was the moment I disliked the dude and made sure he wasn't allowed in anything I hosted or co-hosted in. Speaking of co-hosts, one of the biggest issues that hosts have are co-hosts who try to take over or try to veto your authority. As I said before, I vetoed a bit of authority at one point, but that was because of the trust me and the host had, and I knew he would have done the same thing. If you have a co-host who is constantly making decisions without taking you into account as a host, you need to deal with that quickly, or else they're gonna start taking over. I had a girl who was making adult-themed comments to other players in the game, and I told her to stop, and she said, well, this is just the role. This is how I'm doing it. And I said, no, this is my game, and you are not welcome here if you're gonna act that way. Those kinds of people you cannot allow in your games. You have to put a very hard stomp out of, because they will continue to fester. People like this have no other purpose than to undermine your own games so that people join theirs instead. If you know someone that's a host and you need help, many people would be happy to give you tips privately. But the ones who boast and brag like there's something special aren't worth your time. Your actions as a host should speak more than your connections to crappy people. A good host understands that if you're still learning, you're not going to be perfect. Heck, most hosts have their mistakes. I make mistakes every single game. It's part of being human. Even if they don't agree with your style, they should respect how you choose to host your game. It's a simple equation. If you don't like how someone hosts, then you don't play their games. If they ask you why you don't like to join their games, be honest, be fair, explain to them the components that you dislike. Using Bloodbath again, although it wasn't my style, that doesn't mean it was a bad way to host. Obviously, plenty of people would have disagreed with me, and that's okay. We don't have to agree on everything, and if you choose to end friendships over how someone hosts a game, you've lived a nicer life than most of us. Unless they're that guy who would target female players and punish them to do dirty things. That's a fair reason to be judging someone because of their hosting style. TLDR, you need to keep control of your games at all times. If somebody else is taking control, you need to squash that quickly. If it is somebody that you trust, then you need to go to them and tell them that what they were doing was not okay. Setting those boundaries as a host is the most important thing you can do, because if you do not have control, then you do not have a game. This video went on way longer than I planned it to, so I will be ending it here. I have more I want to cover and will be covering in the following weeks. As usual, feel free to ask any questions you'd like to learn about my experiences in murder mystery in the comments below. I've been playing and hosting murder mystery since 2018 and have a little bit of a soft spot for rambling, so don't worry about feeling like you're annoying. I swear I don't mind. As per usual though, make sure to drink your water, eat your broccoli, and have a fantastic day. See y'all in the next video.